Alrighty then, welcome on back to Evil Inkarnate. Today, got something special. We got a question off of Reddit, or not really a question, just something I happened to find, and decided I was going to go ahead and do a video.
What's going on?
No problem. So, let's take a moment. We've got that blank canvas, every artist's worst nightmare and every writer's greatest fear. Well, Inkarnate does have a tool. If you are having mind blank moment, just like your canvas, you can auto-generate some land masses. What I like to do with it is I'll generate some stuff just to kind of jumpstart the brain. I don't necessarily use it for a lot of my maps unless it is a last minute thing like a campaign, or they're going into a region and I didn't have anything prepared and I absolutely have to have something that night and I don't necessarily have the time to get anything done. But it's a good way to go ahead and get an idea of how is Inkarnate going to auto-generate some land masses for me. To actually take a look at how I'm going to do my own continents, the best way I have found is to go ahead and reference the world that we're living on. So thank you, cartographer, for go ahead and pointing out that a lot of the continents that we have right now, they're going to go ahead and they're going to start with a wide base up at the top, and they're going to come down in an arrowhead shape to the bottom. And you can take a look at some places like South America, Africa, India, even Greenland. They all follow this same general rule. You, of course, have the archipelagos and the peninsulas. They all have differing values with it, but almost everything follows this same general pattern. So we're going to take that idea, and we're not going to really come into this with a plan. So let's go ahead. You can follow along with this. You can have the video open to the side. You can just follow along after maybe, but let's just throw something on here, and then we're going to add and subtract, and then let's come back to it once we have an idea of where things seem to be going. And again, we're not going to come through with a plan. We're just going to let the mouse decide where it wants to go, and then come in after every little pass and chip away or add to it as it seems to have naturally flown out of the brush. Now that we have an idea of where we're starting to go, what you would do is go ahead and you would start going lower and lower and lower on the size of that brush. You would continue to add and subtract. You can increase the amount of water that is near the coastline. You can start making the more jagged shapes. You can add girth to the peninsulas. Girth. You can come in and do the little choppers like I had in a previous video, where you're starting to, have this really kind of a more natural coastline. And again, you're not coming in with a plan, you're coming in and just letting it sort of become natural. And eventually, you'll start to have something like this. And this is a method that I've really appreciated. On the left, you can see a continent that is kind of in the early to mid stages. And on the right, you can see a much more refined version, where a good chunk of this map on the northeast side of the continent, yeah, I'm not going to edit that, you can see I'm a normal person, that all of that is pretty much going to the part where I like. And this is where we're going to work on our cliff section. This is an area called Kalis Pass. In the book that I use this map for, Kalis Pass is sort of a ravine canyon that was formed geologically with a earthquake. Not a necessarily cataclysmic earthquake, but it was definitely part of a larger earthquake that did form, say, the Sarah Rivers and the Red Horse Rivers. So, in addition to canyons, I guess we're kind of retouching on rivers a little bit. Some rivers can actually be formed through geological events like earthquakes, and these are also going to form cliffs. You're talking about continental shifts, you're talking about how tectonics work. So, aside from rivers, plate tectonics, earthquakes, geological seismic activity is going to form cliffs. So I know we're kind of getting into the extremes in world building, but I personally find it interesting. When you're making a fantasy world, if you're making a tabletop world, if you're making a world when you're writing books, just generally saying, oh, I've made a fantasy world and there's magic in it and dragons and things like that, that's great. Consider that the planet itself is alive and the planet itself does have activity. There's things that are beyond your character's control. There's things that happen to just the normal everyday people. Take Timberview. Timberview is right here on the edge of Kalis Pass. 100%, this place did not exist prior to Kalis Pass. They are living here for a reason. So, spoiler alert, the only reason Timberview is even there is because there's a forest and they have a major lumber industry. So, matter of convenience, and that's the only reason they're there. For the cliffs, what you can do is you can kind of tell where I'm going with this. You can scatter the cliffs around coastlines near where you already have very defined cliff stamps, making these very obvious long cliff faces to give the viewer the impression that this entire region of where Twin Rivers is actually on a raised landmass. So when you come through Kalis Pass and then you cross the bridge and you continue in through Kalis Pass and it rises up on that slope, you're actually coming into a lifted area, which is eventually going to be populated by mountains. And because this seems to be a major geological landscape, we're going to give it a name. This is definitely a place that anyone in the region is going to know about. So it's going to have a name. And with those places, I like to add a bit of flair into how I'm naming it. I could give it a straight line, but I like to give it a swooped curve. So I'll split the curve in between the names, kind of do a positive negative split, and then once I get the color and the texture and the spacing to where I like it, I'm gonna flatten it to the foreground, and I suppose you could say burn or stain the name into place. So once you come back in, and as you can see, I've done a lot more work at this point, you can tell that when you've added all that surrounding foliage and a couple more stamps, and you move the stamps around a little bit so you can see the name a little clearer, and you get the impression of that maybe it's a little more of a straight-lined ravine and a bit more passable. This is an area that could be treacherous, but It is one of the more viable routes from the central to eastern portions of this continent, or the Kingdom of Marith on the peninsular continent, over to the Kingdom of Twin Rivers. Or I should say, I misspeak, it's not a kingdom, spoiler alert for later, the region of Twin Rivers, but I say too much. When you have these straight lines, another fun thing you can do, you can make the cliff faces seem not necessarily, should say, steep. You can slope the cliff faces a little more. So, fun story. When I was in Afghanistan, there were some cliffs that you could kind of crawl up. So, there's a fun thought. You're in a whole bunch of military gear with a rifle and a whole bunch of explosives on you, and you see this cliff, and the plan is, yeah, we're gonna crawl up this cliff for the next hour, and then we're gonna sleep on top of the mountain for the next 3 days. Good times. So if you guys wanna, get some free college out of it, there's a thought. Enjoy, but don't regret it. Anywho, we're gonna go ahead and take some of these lines and we're gonna spread them out a little bit and give it a little bit more flavor. And there we have it. That is Kalis Pass. I also have these hills over here. I'm going to go ahead and move them around a little bit just to make them less janky. But it's all about context. When you're making these worlds, think about context, think about relativity, think about scale and scope. So that is just one continent right there. And then coming into the cliffs, you can also just come along the shoreline with, say, the hinterlands. This is kind of a barren wasteland. But one of the features of the hinterlands that I really wanted to imply in the story is there's this region in England called the Cliffs of Dover. And the first time I saw it was in Robin Hood Men in Tights, of all things. And then I saw it again in the Robin Hood movie with, I forgot the actor's name, but he was in Dances with Wolves. And this scene, this imagery of these pale white limestone cliffs is just absolutely fantastic. And they tower over you with this majesty, this grace. And I always imagined what it would have been like in the early days when, say, you're a Vikinger or a Norse trader that's coming in from the southern coasts of England, and you see those cliffs for the first time and they look like ice or some great monolith of alabaster. And then you come in and it's almost sandstone of a texture, is my understanding. But the majesty and the grace. When I think England's coast, I always think of the Cliffs of Dover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these cliffs and I'm going to pack them really, really close together to give the impression that these are extremely steep shoreline cliffs that the waves crash against and have eaten away at the shoreline, just to heighten that sense of you cannot land there. Another way I've been using the cliffs is to kind of make these low rolling cliffs. Not necessarily a hillscape, but kind of ravenous rolling cliffs. Well, this is just a few of the many ways you can use these cliff stamps. You can experiment with these all you want. You can make fault lines. You can make earthquake indications. You can do anything you want with these stamps. Don't hesitate to experiment. Don't hold yourself back just by your contemporaries. Don't let my words or anyone else's words dictate how you're going to write these maps out, how you're going to create your worlds. Always try to push yourself. Always try to push what these tools can do. And if you find new and exciting ways to, you believe, make these worlds better, always believe in yourself and always find the courage to share your work. You can find the Inkarnate Reddit. Always, be encouraged to share your work. Even if you're new, even if you've been doing this for years, don't hold yourself back. But before we end, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of Redditors, to 033 and Randy Random. 033 made this amazing Stargate that he posted up on the Inkarnate Reddit. He got his permission to post it here. Absolutely fantastic. Randy Random also made this mural. Phenomenal work. And just go out, experiment, make what you want, and remember, these worlds are your own, and do what you love. Enjoy.
If you want to see more of the world as you follow along in this series, consider purchasing the author's book, Hero of Oria, available in print and digital format.
Mountains blackened by our quill wash, the hills and trees in sketches grow. Come and weave this tapestry with me. How will it all end? We do not know. Let's fly over stains of blackened mountains, hills, and trees. Take an inky swim through rivers, lakes, and streams. Don't care where you've been, and don't care how long, but as long as you're here, come along. Through the valleys where the rivers run, painting tales, looking for an ending. Draw the night and await the morning sun. Together our path leads round the bend. Untraveled roads rarely leave you guessing. Search the skies, your stars are shining. Find your way and see a new horizon. Journeys only end after beginning. I know you can fly over stains of blackened mountains, hills, and trees. Take an inky swim through rivers, lakes, and streams. Don't care where you're going, how long you'll be away. I will be right here, and here I'll stay.